one thing that's tricky about this room setup, which I'm really into, but it's really tough to find the pivot point. Welcome, everybody. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Evelyn Perry. I'm the artistic director here at Buddies. And I want to take a moment to welcome you all and acknowledge everybody for showing up tonight. I'm really glad that you're here in the room. And this conversation was an addition to our scheduled plan of events for the 40th anniversary. It's a follow-up conversation to one we had in November. And it is really meaningful to see the response from the community in terms of showing up to an in-person conversation. So just acknowledging you all in the room. Thank you. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge where we are and the land that Buddies, this theater, stands on. We have occupied this as a queer theater space for 25 years. It's a city-owned building, and it stands on land that has been the site of human activity for many thousands of years before we got here. And I want to take this moment, as I do every time that we gather together, to pay respect and acknowledge the traditional caretakers of this land, Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabe, and all other nations and stewards of the land, whether they've been acknowledged or unacknowledged, recorded or unrecorded. And we also acknowledge the queer, trans, and two-spirit ancestors on whose shoulders we literally and figuratively stand here in this building. I just have a couple of things to say before I pass the table to Donna Michelle St Bernard, who is going to be our long table facilitator tonight. First and foremost, I want to introduce folks who are staff and board here at Buddies. Maybe we could start with the board members who are in the room, just a show of hands so that folks know who you are. Thank you for being here. I'm blessed with a very supportive and wonderfully involved board, and it's really great to have your presence here. And staff who are here, identify yourselves with your hands as well. So great. Also blessed with an incredible, committed staff who work very hard and are here for this event because it has really been a very galvanizing conversation for all of us to be involved with. So the long table tonight is a follow-up to the long table we held in November. And a word about the long table. This is a forum that, for those of you who haven't been to a long table before, I see many faces who have, but briefly, it's a forum that was invented, I guess, by lesbian performance artist Lois Weaver. And it's a forum that has been really embraced in the Toronto theater-making community in the last few years as a forum for holding contentious, challenging, difficult, interesting conversation. It's a way that we can use performance practice to unpack some of the really timely issues of this moment that we're in. And part of my interest in this forum is that it allows us to practice live conversation with each other in a room, which is something we increasingly are divorced from in our online lives. It's not just a forum for soapboxing or monologuing, it is an invitation into dialogue and conversation. The first rule of the thing is this is a performance of a dinner party conversation. So I'll just remind folks of that tonight. I know DM's going to give you the rules, but that there's an invitation here to really dialogue, to ask a person a question at the table, to act like you're at a dinner party and engage in that way. So the discussion at November's long table was really rich and informative, really emotional, really intense, and it certainly did not resolve any issues, but it opened up a space, a really important space. And it certainly didn't represent all the voices or opinions that were gathered in the room that night. And tonight's long table is an invitation to continue that conversation, to hear more voices, to make more space. The provocation last time for the table was, in these increasingly polarized times, how can we as intergenerational queer community cherish all that makes us different and conquer all that makes us afraid? If you want to hear more about that discussion, it's all archived on video, and you can find it on our blog, as well as some other context around what led up to that conversation. We continue to be committed to making Buddies a space for open community dialogue, debate, and discussion, and to listening, and to continue to hold space for divergent views and for reaching across our divides. So tonight's provocation, which grew out of the last one, was sort of identified by several of us who are working on these issues as something that would be a nice follow-up to that, is within our diverse and evolving intergenerational queer and artistic communities, how do we navigate the tensions between free speech and accountability, dissent and respect? Before I hand the table to DM, a couple quick housekeeping things. We're going to be videotaping, not live streaming tonight's conversation, so it is archived, and we will be making that publicly available probably within the next 10 days. First, we have to get our operating grants in. Then I want to let you know that staff and board are free to participate at the table today. You are your own people. Please feel free to participate in the dialogue freely. And there's going to be one follow-up long table that is planned for May the 13th. And you're all invited in advance to put that in your book. It's a community meal and conversation, so there will be food and another long table at that time. And if you wish, between now and May, to participate in more intergenerational queer conversation, Leslie and Daniel are convening, who are, like, raise your hands over there, are going to be convening a series of slightly less formal conversations over the coming months, and all those details are available on our website also. I hand it over to you.
I accept it. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Aren't we good looking? So I'll let you know, I'm going to go a little bit backwards by beginning with, I invite you to the table so that you have the whole rest of this time that I'm talking to think about getting over here. There are 10 seats at the table. Ideally, one will always be empty so that whoever's in the room feels always invited to join us. One will always be occupied by me, but mostly quietly, don't worry. I'm going to read the rules that are here and then sort of just elaborate very briefly on how I hope we're going to be doing this today. So, as Evelyn mentioned, these are Los Weaver's rules set from which we are building on. This is a performance of a dinner table conversation. Anyone seated at the table is a guest performer. Talk is the only course. No one will moderate. Psych. But a host may assist you. Partly true. It is a democracy. To participate, simply take an empty seat at the table. If the table is full, you can request a seat. And in this case, I'd ask that if the 10th seat becomes full, that one of the other 8 people at the table excuses yourself and makes your seat available. If you leave the table, you can come back again and again. You may feel free to write your comments on the tablecloth. There can be silence. There might be awkwardness. There can always be laughter. There will be an end, but no conclusion. And to that, I will only add, I'll reinforce what Evelyn said about dialogue over monologue, which I really appreciate you mentioning, Evelyn, that hopefully all of our guests at this table will conduct ourselves with respect for each other and each other's opinions, and also want to acknowledge that while these particular long tables came from a thing that happened, they are not necessarily about a thing that happened. But, and if you think that they are, that's fine. In my opinion, they're more about what are we going to do and how are we going to be moving forward, how are we choosing to be with each other as a community. And so I invite you to bring a demonstration of how we can be with each other as a community to the table, to let people finish their thoughts whenever possible, to seek clarity before you respond if you're not sure what was intended, and to engage in dialogue where that's appropriate or possible, It's possible. It just is. So, after all that vamping, I would like to invite anyone who feels like they already have some thoughts that they want to launch us off with. Talking first is a power play. This is your chance. And I'm going to reread the provocation because I found that when reading through it, I sort of meditated on specific words each time through. And so, invite you to see what aspect of this feels the most important to you and bring that to the table. Within our diverse, evolving, and intergenerational queer and artistic communities, how do we engage with the tension between freedom of speech and accountability, between dissent and respect? I will now wait quietly. This is the hardest part. Hi, welcome to the table.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so glad you came.
Me too. I never talk first, so
I love it.
I think what helped me get here was that you opened up that space. Like you said, talking first is a power play, which is the provocation. Like you didn't just open it up and say like you can't, like someone can talk first, which is obvious, but you made it seem somehow possible. So that was cool.
Well, it was true because you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this conversation because I think about these questions a lot, about free speech, about accountability. I'm a recovering academic. Just finished my PhD last year, and I wrote my dissertation on slam poetry in Madagascar, but I was really interested in this question of like, what seems possible to say in a given context, and how do speakers decide what I can and cannot say? And that's a huge question, obviously, right? But in what I found in slam poetry in Madagascar specifically was that this one poet had this, he told me one time, or he told a group of poets actually, he was doing a workshop, and he said, you have the freedom to say anything you want in a slam, but that freedom has to be managed. You have to manage what you say, and you have to manage the stage. And so it was precisely about accountability, right? That we can never think about free speech alone without also thinking about the responsibility of speech and responsibility for the consequences of what you say. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what I wanted to throw out there, and I'm curious to see if you have thoughts about that, or if anyone else has thoughts about what does it mean to manage your freedom of speech for you.
That's such a good start. You did the right thing. That interests me. I'm interested in the how we expand from that idea of freedom of speech is not freedom from critique, which is, I guess, the other end of that, because what you're talking about is more how we manage ourselves before we get to that critique moment. And I'm thinking about artists who say, it's not my job to worry about how you're going to take it, it's my job to speak unfettered. Welcome. And what does that mean? Yeah. Hi.
Hi. I think it's interesting to think about that in terms of intergenerational action, because some of the older contingent people that I know, they're not so active on social media, or they're not so active in like the communications and like the rapidity, like just like the pace of communications. And so I wonder too, like how that can be achieved in the community. You know, I think sometimes like opening like a blog to comments is a way to do it. Perhaps having a place where people can respond.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Really quickly, sorry, I want to mention, since you brought that up, I don't know if we mentioned that you're also welcome to write thoughts on the wall. Maybe I said that. I want to make sure it got said. Not everyone wants to come to the table and be vocal, and also you may have a giant thought that's a slow burn, and we'll be like, and we're done. It'll be like, oh, it just came to me. So you can write it over there or write it over here, etc. I'm sorry for interrupting the phone.
No. My name is Kai.
Hey.
So in managing free speech, I got it when I heard that, and then I tried to make not too much sound, and so I missed a little bit of what you said in the beginning. But for me, I feel like that requires an individual to have a strong awareness, I think, of the general, space that they exist in. And I think because technology connects us all, it's almost like you have access to the internet. At some point, you have to be able to hold yourself accountable as a part of society to, at the very least, know what exists out there outside of you and your own siloed world. And the intergenerational piece, it's my biggest fear to get to a point in my life where I'm unable to see or accept the ideas or thoughts of a different group of people, and how I may have, the things that I've done or will do may have an impact on them in a negative way. So it's how do you build that awareness, I think, throughout the spectrum of age and experience? That's a question.
Yeah, I think the generational piece has become quite significant at this point.
Yeah, I think so too, because like a lot of the conversations that I'm involved in happen on like Twitter, even Instagram, Facebook, and so like I just like follow them like da 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 da, like read them so rapidly, and then I'm on doing something else, and I just think that like sometimes I take for granted that I'm like I can operate on that level, and maybe that's not the case for people that are older. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting in online spaces like that too is that it's precisely impossible to know the audience, to fully know the context that this is going to be read in, because it could be read by anybody, potentially anyone with a Twitter account or access to internet, and who knows, you won't see their response to it unless they comment, right? And so, yeah, how do we even gauge response when the only way to respond, to like see someone's comment, is for it to be on, the Twitter space, right? Like, or I don't know, if you like see somebody reading a tweet, then you might see their reaction, but other than that,
How does that translate into live performance space, though? Like, what is the feedback mechanism, and what is the accountability in a live performance space?
Yeah, like, are you saying like the stuff that happens, is it like that the stuff that happens online should be separated from like a live performance? Like, are they two spaces that coexist, or are they separate spaces? Like, for us?
Yeah, they're definitely in dialogue with each other, but I mean, I feel like we know how to reply online.
Yeah.
And so it's a more of an open-ended question for me, is how do we respond to work that we see, or to our colleagues, and the positions that they're taking in a healthy way.
Like approaching the artist afterwards, or the director, or someone involved. My immediate thought was, well, I'd go online, and then if we remove the online piece, then it becomes, how do you engage in a way that I don't think I would ever want to attack someone after they perform the piece and be like, how dare you say this, or something like that. I'd much rather go off, reflect, and then if I really do have a strong visceral reaction that hasn't, wane in the next 24 hours, and all right, maybe I should speak to someone, or decompress it. That's my immediate train of thought.
Hello. So, there's an immediate thought to when you say, it is my job as a person experiencing something to deconstruct it, evaluate, understand it, and then push it off to the side, and not to reply to the piece of work that you see. If you see a piece that is, for instance, maybe a bit more southern than we are, where it's white nationalism, isn't that great? Everyone, let's all have a party, and it's your job to see this piece, go home and go, the solution right now is to deconstruct how I feel about white nationalism and why it's great. Or is your immediate reaction, I must reply to this in some form, in either creating my own piece of theater as a response, or to take this to someone who you believe could moderate this? Or do you take it to another third party who you believe can act as an intermediary between the two of you?
Quick question is this at me or everyone, or?
I mean, I think all questions at the table are to the room. Yeah, to anyone who feels moved to answer them, but you should feel free.
So, yeah, I think it depends on what was in front of me. If I'd be hard-pressed to find myself choosing to attend a show about a KKK rally. But if I saw that, I think, again, what's in front of me is explicit hate, right? And so I think my reaction would be very different from, let's say, if I saw a show that had something that was a little bit, I was like, I don't know if that's completely kosher or acceptable. Like, that requires a little bit of deconstruction because I don't understand it. But I can say that with something a little that's far more like aggressive, I would have an immediate reaction. I would most likely want to reach out to be able to support. It's like, how do I even begin to articulate or respond to whoever created that piece, and why was it allowed in a space like this? So it depends on what I see in front of me, that reaction. And again, I think that also comes from an incredible space of privilege where I have the capacity to go off and reflect, or I have that space or that energy or whatever it is that I have. Because I don't think everyone does. And then it's like, how then as a part of a collective whole, at least my community, how do I think protect them and myself? I think it's such a weird scale of just so many different factors that go into how I myself would choose to respond.
But granted, there would be systemic things you'd never be aware of. As when you were saying earlier with age, how do you keep up with the changing of political opinion and understanding and context? As that evolves, you may not always be evolving with it. You may be outside of it and be growing in different aspects in your life. And then you go see a piece and you say, oh, that was whatever. But to another person who might be sitting right next to you, they say, this is the worst thing I've ever seen and it hurts me in so many levels. But to you, you can go home. That person, they had no expectation that that was going to happen to them during the show. But it's within within the world that you're building, it is on the viewer's job to get over it.
I feel like you've both raised the concept of safety. I'll say, sorry, just because I just saw your face. Yeah. I don't know that Kai's position is as absolute as it's the viewer's problem, as much as it is that is a response to a live show. Am I misrepresenting you?
No, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's more agreement here than it feels like necessarily, but I do definitely hear the thread of safety being raised and how the necessity of a response becomes greater when someone is harmed as opposed to just someone doesn't like the work.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the nexus of what we're talking about, right? What is the responsibility to address it if people are actually actively harmed by it, either ideologically or in the moment of experiencing the show as a viewer?
But it's also a privilege point to say I can go home and deconstruct it.
Yeah.
That was the impetus of the thought. Not to attack the person or the words that they're saying, but the visceral reaction that I had was
and I think that's absolutely valid. Yeah, I think that's an absolutely valid point. And it resonates with me because there are certainly some things that, maybe for all of us, there's some things that I'm like, body shock. And I know other people went home, and then vice versa for some other things where I'm like, yeah, I've seen this. And so I'm going to think about it conceptually, and someone else is thinking about it in their body and can't leave the theater.
Or they have to leave.
Or they have to leave the theater, yeah. And then that sort of makes me wonder, what do we do when it's likely that person who is most hurt is least able to speak to it? Hi, Ty.
Hi. I think we're living in a lot of theory and questions at this table.
Yeah.
Which is how I saw the tensions rise just now. And so I'm going to request maybe not living in academic theory and question, and more in your lived experience in the community.
That's all. Brings down, bro.
I mean, it's interesting, like, because I think about safe spaces and curation a lot, and like, I don't know, it's so hard, and I, as an artist, I become like worried that like there will be a form of art that like censorship, you know, like that are we getting to the point where certain things shouldn't be said, or I mean, has that always been the case? Like, obviously there's like, I don't want to, sorry, I'm nervous to speak. This is like intimidating. I want to make sure I sound smart and everything. But
we'll airbrush it. Go on.
You know, like, for instance, like sexuality and sex, and I'm very interested in exploring that through the work that I do, and you know, after sort of post Me Too and everything, I've felt a little bit like, oh, can we put sex on stage in the same way that we have in the past? And certainly, as a queer person, I find that that's like a part of the art that I make, and so that's like you're right, like safety, like how can we know what's going to be hurting someone, or like should we even be aware like of that when we're making art? I'm not sure. Like, I know at the theater center, for instance, they don't have they don't post like show like trigger warnings or anything like that, you know. And that's just what they've chosen to do. And I think, you know, for some shows, yeah, that works, but does it work for everything? And in our performance spaces, how do we ensure that people are getting like the care that, you know, I think that we as artists like want to provide? It's like a caring thing to like put your heart on the table in a way. So
yeah, I'll round that out with, it's a caring thing to sit there and listen as well.
Oh,
like,
totally.
It's like everyone in the room is
yeah,
in
it's
that.
like an exchange, right? Like full energy exchange.
Yeah.
So to have somebody like leave and feel like, oh my God, that was like totally crushing and soul crushing, and as we were saying, like audience reaction can be so totally polar opposite to things. It's like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure what that.
I mean, I think we're here because we're not sure.
Yeah, I know, right?
Hi.
Hi. My name is Leslie, and this is Lily.
Hi, Lily. Hi,
I
Leslie.
want you to see me, and I want you to see Lily, my mobility device. I'm glad Ty said what they did, because for me it's all theoretical. I walk out my front door in the morning, and I expect respect. Behavior doesn't always work that way. So in the many communities in which I live here in Toronto, buddies, I'm here a lot. So last October, I believe, there was Naked Heart, and I was here, and I was misgendered. Big conversation on the stage about intersectionality, and I was called he by one of the speakers on the stage. So what do we do when these things happen? I go dancing at Glad Day, and last June, and I'm talking about behaviors, never mind how we talk about our opinions. For me, what most matters is how people treat me in their behaviors. So I'm asking you, how can you see intergenerationally? Because I know I'm not the oldest person here. There's somebody who's older than me, but I'm usually the oldest person in the room when we're talking from an intergenerational perspective. So I'm at Glad Day, going into Glad Day to a women's dance last June, and there's a security person outside, and the person says, "Are you going in there?" And I said, "Yes, I'm going in there." "Really? You're using a cane. Can you see how crowded it is in there?" And then I get to the door, and the person who's taking the money says the same thing. Now, there's a law against that, right? I'm talking about behavior. So now I get in, and I have my little spot, my seat, and I'm dancing in a spot where I feel I'm safe physically, so nobody's knocking me over. And then people are standing right in front of me like I'm totally invisible. But then I come out to these things, and I hear these lovely conversations about diversity and inclusion and how do we work together intergenerationally. but the behaviors do not play out in actual fact when I am out in the world. So for me, where is that respect? And I'm asking people at the table who are younger than me. That's why I want you to see me when I'm out there. And I've noticed other people who are using mobility devices at different social events, and we become invisible, but yet we're having these conversations about inclusion and diversity, but it's not playing out. So what would you suggest that you can do differently to see us and recognize that we are part of this larger community? I'm looking for suggestions.
I mean, like, I would, if I was the manager at Glad Day, I'd be talking to all the people that are running the parties, you know.
Well, I already had a conversation with Michael.
That they should be, you know, telling everyone who's at the door, running the door, they should be having conversations with their security guards, like practical things, right?
Well, they supposedly did the AODA training.
Right.
But it's attitudes.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that, like, these are the kind of things that you can do after something has taken place. Mm-hmm. But I think, and like, sorry if this is a little bit more in the theory territory again, but I think the bigger question is how we set up a system in which it's understood that those things are not acceptable.
Right.
Like, how do we trickle down from management, and then in a broader way, like, how do we take more people into consideration when we're creating the work, when we're creating spaces?
And
how do we think beyond our own self and our own use of that space and that time?
Because you see these things up on walls, like you were talking about at the place that you go to, they're not the warnings.
Yeah.
And then you go to certain places and you see we do not accept oppressive behaviors or discriminatory behaviors. But then the behaviors are happening. So what can we do as a larger community to stop this from happening? Or when you see it happening, if you see me across the room and you see people standing in front of me when I've carved out my tiny little space, what would you do? I'm asking you to be my ally.
Yeah. Well, I've seen you out a lot dancing, actually, and I've never actually had the guts to introduce myself, so I am Claire.
Claire, this is Leslie. Leslie, this is Claire.
Well, yeah, I'd come dance with you, I guess. Come hang with you, make sure that you're, you know, okay, but also have fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're out there together.
Because as my younger friends know from the Youth Elders Project, one day, if you're lucky, you too will be a queer senior. Mm-hmm. So what I'm asking is for you to think down the road, how would you want to be treated? Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to be static where you are at this age now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know. So I'm just giving you things to think about, you know, how can we make change happen and be accountable to each other? Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about respectful ways of expressing ourselves, it's also how we behave ourselves or misbehave ourselves. I mean, I've been physically assaulted at the washroom in the 519 because anybody can use that space. So now they're coming up with a campaign to make sure that, not that it's never going to happen again, but I don't want to always be the person saying, you know, behaviors have to change. I don't want to always be the little angry brown person. It's hard being angry all the time, especially when you want to go out dancing. You just want to have a good time. I mean, Lily can reach out and touch a lot of ankles. You know? So when you see me out there dancing, make space for me, but come and dance with me.
Okay.
But for me, the bottom line is, how do we change our behaviors? Mm-hmm. How do we hold ourselves accountable? Those are my questions.
Yeah.
I think it's partly things like this, like having these face-to-face interactions where we do see each other and we hear each other. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, you know, like in that moment when the bouncer said something to you, unless you, like, you might be able to say something back or to then like tell that story to us, but you might not be, and like a lot of people aren't, and it's not fair to put the burden of that on you and for you to be the one who has to tell people what happened and to, tell the manager or whatever. Like, so I think, it's partly about having other people keeping an eye out, like having allies, having other people standing up and saying like, oh, that that's not okay, and intervening, so that it's not, so the onus isn't always on the person experiencing these microaggressions.
They're not micro.
Macro. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I'm glad Ty said what they did, because academic stuff is all floating around in theory. I live this life. So when you start talking about theories, it's not helping me to be never mind safe, but just to be out there and for you to know that I'm there.
But it makes the gays safe by talking in theory. Mm-hmm. We exist now by talking in theory. The theory of being oppressed, and then looking at other people who are oppressed and being like, we need to support those people who are oppressed so that they're not oppressed. But then we continue to perpetrate the same thing where we don't see you at Glad Day and dance with you. I think that I need to address my shame. I want to be like really liked. I want to be really liked by this whole fucking community. I want to be really hot, and really talented, and really liked. I want to walk in the room and have people look at me. And so then, it doesn't matter in the end, because people do like me for who I am, and people see me how they see me, regardless of how I want to. But like, I need to like address that, and then address whatever shame comes into me, so that if I see you at Glad Day, and I want to dance with you, that I actually do it without thinking about someone else's opinion. But then we also like live in this like weird time right now, Leslie, too, where like the safer thing is to not talk to someone that you don't know. Which is like super fucked up, because we're not really a community. We're just like a bunch of little pods occupying one space.
It's interesting that you say that, because when we were doing the podcast project, one of the young people there said friendship is so different these days, because if somebody does something that you don't like, you just dismiss them and you move on to the next person. But you don't have a conversation, a face-to-face as to why did that upset me? Can we talk about it? And when I go to Glad Day or to a lot of different events, people are down on their devices. And I try to engage in I guess I'm old-fashioned, and to me a face-to-face talking, because people say to me, well, can't I text you or just give me your cell number? No, we pick up the phone and call me, or let's meet and have a chat. You and I used to do that, but it's sort of fallen by the wayside. And it's
accountability.
No, but it will just open up your world so much to go out and say to somebody, have you ever asked anybody to dance? It doesn't even happen anymore that you ask somebody to dance. How do you connect with people? That's why these conversations are so wonderful. And to make the effort to continue the conversation, not just here, where it's so structured. So one of the things I try to do every day is talk to somebody new. People look at me like I'm a little bit nutty. Part of my culture is good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And when I do that, people look at me like something wrong with that person. And I'm just being polite, I see you in your day. And that's the latest thing, I see you. But do you see each other? Do we see each other? Do we? Do you see me? I saw you as soon as I came in, because you were very striking. And I wanted to talk to you.
Hello.
Hi. What's your name?
My name is Jesse.
Jesse. I didn't hear your name when you sat down. So that's my 5 cents.
It's much more than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't even go if you don't want to. Stay if you want to stay.
So I'll stay. Since there are 2 free seats, 3
Yeah,
seats.
I think that's nice. I don't want to cut off anyone who has a thought on the tip of their tongue. Do you have a thought on the tip of your tongue? I wanted to conflict with you, Ty.
I love it.
Great. Or just, I guess, to introduce a conflict between, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's healthy to say, like, to acknowledge that you want to be liked and you care what people think, and acknowledge that that's complicated. And I want to know if there's what is the space between I super care all the time what everybody thinks, and it's not my job to care what people are going to think about this work. Do you know what I mean? And especially because because a lot of the stories that you tell are not already told. So then where's the tension between this story needs to be told and I can't care who's going to not like it, and I want everyone to be happy with this thing. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And I mean, to the room, like, not just a tie, but I'm pushing into something that you said. I'm just wanting to complicate it.
Well, the work that you and I are doing together right now, the play that we are actively working on together, it's called Liminal. That play was a story that I told Daniel Carter, and Daniel Carter was like, you should write it. And I was like, maybe. And then I didn't. Yay, theater. I didn't because I didn't think anybody wanted to hear it. And it wasn't until that I made a joke of myself to Diana Belshaw did she go, you should apply for the Anemic Creators Unit. And then I did it because I thought that, like, that was what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Like, to continue to be the emerging theater artist that I was supposed to do, and to have someone take what I was, take myself as a joke and be like, let's take you seriously. I was like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And then I think I was even shook even more when you were introduced into my life, because I remember meeting you at the Lilies workshop, and I was shook by you, and I did not feel like I did the work that I was supposed to do as a theater artist at that reading well. And you looked at me and you said, you're going to be here for a while. And I was like, okay. And so I don't know. I still enter the communities that I identify with, and then try to give them my best. And what happens with me often is that because I'm an intersectional body, I dismiss some stuff. So like how I would behave with you in a room, who I've been able to jam out like hard conversations and be like, I want to tell the story really bad, versus like jamming the same play idea to another dramaturg in this room is completely different, because you chose to believe me in as a person before you chose to believe anything else, before you even read my work. And so that shifted things. But sometimes I don't always feel like I can enter this community as just a person.
What a scary sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I walked into this cabaret space for so many different things, and every single time I walk in, it's like a new skin. Mm-hmm. I walked into this room to do a round table, and then monologued, like I'm kind of doing right now, acknowledging that. But I've also walked into this space like high as a kite, drunk off my ass, wanting to be seen in a very specific way, and then not be seen at all.
So do Do you feel that you have an image to live up to?
Oh, yes.
But who put that there?
I know that it's me.
Yeah.
But it's that constant battle of like, I hold myself to the standard of people before me because I don't want to feel alone in the thing that I'm doing.
I think there's a big thing in there in terms of the difference between, or like, is there different accountability if your story is well represented? You know, and like, because the thing, sort of one of the last notes on my sheet is, how do we hold ourselves accountable? That might have been you, Leslie, saying that, I don't know, with somebody. And I think that is one of the big questions of today, is how we hold ourselves and each other accountable in a healthy way. But also, like, how do we determine what the limits of restraint are within each of our stories, what's appropriate, right? Because there's some people who habitually self-censor, and some people who do not censor at all and should. Hi.
Don't look at me when you say that.
That was accidental. That was more me relinquishing noise.
Solid timing.
Hey.
Hey.
You should talk as much as you want.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes I find myself very overwhelmed. Very, very overwhelmed and almost scared by the complexity of what accountability means right now, the complexity of the diversity of our community, the many layers of complexity that I feel the more I learn, the more complex it becomes.
Yeah.
And so when I think about art as both a tool of great healing and beauty and also possibly harm, and almost in both in equal stead, and the riskier and the more beautiful it is, the more chance almost there is of harm, because when you push out to risk, when you push out to edges, which I think are so critical to beautiful art, it can almost increase its possibility of harm. So I spend a lot of time thinking, overthinking, flipping back and forth. I'm a Gemini. So I'll have it quite certain that this is the right thing to do and this is the right, and then something like flips in me and I see it from the complete other side. And I actually have a lot of trouble as an individual, as an artist, as a curator, holding the complexities of what I learn when it comes to the curation of art. So I think I want to say that, like, the complexity of the time that we're in excites me as much as it scares me. It's so interesting to me. Like, that's where the art I love lives, is in these beautiful, intersecting, shadowed, complex, prismatic places. But my head explodes, like, once every 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And is that normal?
Let's do a quick poll. Is anyone in here completely unexploded? No,
like,
okay, it's normal.
Is that just what it is?
It's normal.
Like, is that just what it is to try and live, to try and work this way, to try and work in a way that thinks and reads and considers the evolving politics of our communities and our languages and our ways of being? Is this brain explosion just like what we want, actually?
Isn't that what keeps us alive?
Reluctantly?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I worry that it draws me closer to burnout sometimes. But at the same time, I'm still here, and it hasn't changed the impetus of wanting to go towards the flame. Like, I need to go towards the things that scare me, and those things that scare me could be the beautiful, healing kind of art, but it equally could be the scary, harmful, shit. And the more I chase it, like a moth. Oh, look at me with my metaphor. The more I chase it, the higher the chances that I'll get burned. which again excites as much as it terrifies. And when it comes to like my role, I'm not a creator. I curate art. I work with artists, and it's sort of my job actually to push them to that, like to push them to that point, to push them to that place. And so when we talk about like the complexity of intergenerational queer and diverse communities, and I'm talking about pushing artists into this new fate, like new work, new art, new really nascent, gentle things that are so fragile and also incredibly strong and impactful. I really, it is my role actually to protect them, and as well to hold spaces for the audiences that would be impacted by these things.
How do you like hold a space for an audience?
Yeah, I don't know.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I think more and more it's coming into the actual dramaturgy of the piece itself. Like, I think more and more theater is trying to, within the structure of itself, contain it so that it is actually the experience of a piece of art is as much how you walk up to the building, where you go to the washroom, where you, like, what that box office experience, like, it's all of it. It's all of it. And in a place like Buddy's, it's a really specific thing, because we have this room that we're in right now. And I don't know how much of a, like, it's a super passive thing. Like, I mean, I could say talkbacks, I could say long tables and discussions. Like, it's a really passive thing that I'm doing. I'm caring for my audience. I don't know. I show them the art. But I think there is something in the dramaturgy of theater that is trying to do that within the piece itself. Which is why you get a lot of didactic art. Art that is sort of explaining as it's going. Because we're trying to create that space within the piece itself. But then I just end up getting a bit lectured to sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't have a fully formed thought. I'm gonna try and get there, because everything is coming together in some way or shape in my head. But I think back to the idea of behaviors, and then spaces like this where you can have those really tough conversations, and safety. And as soon as you mentioned that, I thought about where do I feel safe, and it's like I have sort of scaled back dramatically the number of times I've gone out to things. And to be honest, the only time I ever feel safe in a space is probably either at home with my close group of friends that I've had for a very long time, or like in this space. And a lot of times it's only when like there's a staff member or board member or Evelyn present. And I grew up in different ways in this building, and I think about how I've learned or how I choose to do the right thing that is not just best for like my own immediate comfort, but then as someone who has a lot of privilege, how do I use that capacity to help others around me? And it comes to behavior. So it's like, if I had that capacity, how do I find the courage to exhibit that action that I believe is right, despite what I think of others thinking about me, which is this strange battle in my head that I have to constantly sort of sort through. And then at the same time, it's like, unless you see that behavior modeled in front of you, I don't think it's hard to sort of learn to do it all the time, if that makes sense. So, I'm all over the place right now, I apologize. But when it comes to the work that, as artists in this building, and doing all the work that you just mentioned, to me it feels like it's like this frontline work of art. And Buddy's has always been on that sort of edge, and it's like that responsibility is so huge, and you do this, like it's the choice that you make to devote your life to. And as someone who, I'm not an artist, I'm not a performer, but I'm a supporter. So for me, myself, I can only speak to like what else can I do as a human, as a part of this group of people that I talk to or will talk to in the future. Yeah. How do I help ease that experience? Not in a way where it's like I'm working with you guys in the space or whatever, but like as a customer and as a board member. And it's like I take my cues from the people around me that are brought into this building to do different things, and I watch and I listen. I'm usually very, very silent because I'm constantly trying to learn. It's like, what is the right thing to do, or to behave, because sometimes I'm afraid of, I want to do the right thing, my intention is there, but if I'm wrong, I'm going to be ridiculed to the point of where I never want to come out of my house again. And it's like there's that constant fear. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts right now. So thank you for listening.
So it's a risk. It's always a risk that we're taking.
That's what it feels like. But it shouldn't be, doing the right thing shouldn't feel like a risk.
No, but that risk doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And I disagree. I think doing the right thing often is a big risk. Huge risk. Absolutely.
I want to just turn to some of the new faces at the table and ask them if they want to have their voice in the mix.
Hi, my name is Vince. And so far, I've been sitting back and listening, and some of the things that I keep hearing repeatedly are shaming, fear, anxiety, censorship. There's a lot of dichotomy that I keep hearing. How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we hold others in our community accountable? There's almost a dichotomy in there embedded. This idea of calling out and calling in, and dichotomies have never really served our community and very well, and we should really not adopt these strategies. It just doesn't work for us. That's just personal opinion. I've been into a lot of spaces where curators and organization and institution do a lot of land acknowledgement as lip service because they don't want to be shamed. So how can our community avoid repeating those kind of actions where we're not acknowledging each other just because we don't want to be shamed, or where we feel like we have to be held accountable? And I agree very much with what you say. Great art comes from taking great risk, and great risk comes with all the failures. So how does our community embrace failure? How is it that somebody can fail flat in their face and still come back into the community and be welcome open arms? It comes back to great art, right? If we're not going to take the risk, then why are we in it? Some intergenerational issues I've been working on a while. A couple of years back, doing a lot of intergenerational projects. I don't think there's that big of a gap as we think we have. We know each other better than we think we do. We see each other more than we think we do, but we don't talk about it. So I'm very grateful that we have this kind of space to talk about it. We just need space to talk. We don't have the space. We don't have enough space in the city to have the kind of conversations that we have. I remember seeing this iteration at Rhubarb's on the intergenerational, the very first version that was done. Extremely moved by it because you can feel the audience buzzing, a bit of anger, a bit of angst. People still wanted the conversation to continue. And that's only because that conversation was way overdue. Way overdue. Conversation about accountability is also way overdue. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I'm just going to end it there.
I just want to say for I guess everyone, because everyone feels rambly at the table, but we are talking our way into the thought, and that is all right. That sometimes is how you find the thought, so that is all right, and not to worry about that. We're not presenting prepared material. So there's value in the meander. Thanks for that, Vince. Did you want to say?
I'll go for the ramble. I'm Stephen, by the way. So the thing that I wrote down here, in part, comes from what you said, Ty, about wanting to be seen as yourself first, and just in this conversation with the first provocation about how do we engage with the tension. The first thing, or one of the things that I was thinking about is this is really good. We're all here. We're all willing to have this conversation. We're all leaned in. We're all empathetic, and we want to be able to understand each other. but then what about the person who is so wrapped up in themselves and doesn't even know this community exists and doesn't care it exists? Like, how do you talk to that person who, who lives in their own bubble? And from that own bubble, they can't even see that there's another bubble there to engage with, and they might not want to. And sort of something off of that is, some of the best productive conversations between people of opposing views that I've, witnessed or been a part of is being able to see the other person and say, I see where you're coming from. And so what I wrote here is, I see where you're coming from, and I've just bubbled out the you and then the coming from in separate things. And those two things are kind of in opposition, but they don't necessarily have to be. And I think bringing them together is a part of the way to navigate that tension. Because oh God, thought is falling away from me. Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking about how do you back to the provocation? How do you respect someone who you disrespect because of what they represent or what they're saying? And if what all you've gotten from them is something that's particularly egregious, and you're like, well, then you are that egregious thing, and it's not that you are the person who has been shaped by that. And I think a way in is to engage with the person as, you're a human being, I'm a human being, but what I'm trying to hack away at is the things that have shaped you into the person who is now egregious to me. And they might think the exact same thing in the opposite way, and navigating with the you versus where you're coming from, and understanding more with the where you're coming from. If you can give the person that degree of respect, hopefully they might be able to give you that degree of respect. This is just the only thing that I've got in my head as far as engaging with that tension.
Sorry, I have a story that maybe I would like to share with that story, because there's this idea of hacking away at somebody that I find that's very us in the moment, Toronto identity politics moment. I had the pleasure last year to go back to Vietnam and was working. And while I was working, I got a chance to meet with a group of queer activists in Vietnam, because in the last couple of years, a lot of programs has been ripped away from us. We're trying to rebuild it back. And Love Simon was at first couldn't get into the country. Call Me By Your Name, couldn't get into the country. We had the film. We did an illegal screening. 400 people came. They requested that we show it back so that they can have their family members, people who are not queer, to come see the show. Screening was roughly about 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. People stayed to 2 a.m. to talk. Most of the audience members were not queer. It was one of the best environment and conversation I've ever had. Been the privilege of participating. It's because no one was trying to hack at somebody's identity down. There are a lot of farmers who, their grandson might be, this is their first encounter with the queer community, right? Mm-hmm. They come, they have a lot of beliefs and things that has already been structured. Who they are, what their beliefs are, but they're there, and they're there to listen, and they're there to share their thoughts, but ultimately their love for their family member. That is a way in. I feel that's a way in for a conversation. We don't need to hack at anything. We just need to look for, I feel like a little string to pull each other a bit closer. Sometimes that string is very thin, and if we pull too hard, it breaks. So I think we also, as a community, also has to know when to exert that pressure and when to be delicate. Because not everybody has that, that environment, that education, that privilege, that wherever their location, they may not have what we have, and we need to look for other alternatives, way to pull us closer.
Very nice. Yeah. I'm just gonna check in with Mazil over there. Are you, Ling? Are you holding a thought?
You came to the table before me. Do you want to say something?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
She didn't have a hat, so I didn't.
My name's Marissa. I wanted to thank you for your comments about intergenerationality and accessibility of queer events and the bar scene, such as it is for queer women. And I think it's definitely about people's individual behaviors, but I think it's also about how events are designed, how they're promoted, whether they're only promoted online or if they're promoted in other ways as well. Whether you have chairs, you know, whether there's a level of comfort for people with disabilities or for elders. And it's also systemic. And I wanted to bring that piece to the table. Because I feel terrified these days with the government that we have. Not just provincially, actually, but federally. It's not even anymore about what's going on in the U.S. It's global, right? So we have a government that has made it more difficult for people with disabilities to get government funding, that is chipping away at what little benefits there are. And with that, I want to gently trouble a little bit the binary between like the academic and the
actual. Can I just before you trouble it, can I ask you to trouble it a little louder for the folks in the back? Thank you.
So I'm going to come out as an academic, you know, we're fighting these issues very viscerally right now at our institutions. Free speech, you know, universities are being forced to allow right-wing Nazi sympathizers on campus to speak, and that's being resignified as free speech. The funding cutbacks are the cuts to tuition are being used by universities to implement wide-ranging austerity measures that are only going to hurt students of color, queer students, queer faculty, racialized faculty. So it's, to me, free speech and accountability are really linked. I have a responsibility to use the free speech that I have. And I may be terrified, but I'm terrified from a privileged position. And I'm also triggered, like in my family, you know, it's just one generation back to the Nazi concentration camps. That's what used to pass for conversation at my family's dinner table. And at the same time, because of the organizing work and the research that I'm privileged to do, I'm able to have conversations with people with disabilities and migrants and migrant organizers for whom it almost feels like the battle has been lost. And so, just to bring it back to theater, I guess I want to ask, like, how can we make art, theater, performance accountable? How can we make it part of a conversation to power, with power? It's such a powerful practice, theater. It's one of the few sort of almost entirely analog, embodied experiences that we have in this mediated society, besides sex. Just thought I'd throw that in.
You have my full attention.
Sex. Just wanted to. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, how do we speak? How do we make that conversation with power? And in this case, with right-wing power, with racist power, how do we make that happen in this space?
I'll jump in now. So I'm going to catch everyone up on my brain because so much has happened since I decided to join this movement. It's like, oh my gosh, everyone's so smart. And also I'm going to out myself as an academic. Also, there's so many of us here. But also agree that it's incredible. I think it's very practical. The conversation that we're having, I think it's actually very similar when we put together syllabi and people put together artistic seasons. We're thinking about whose voices we want to elevate and whose voices are foundational and whose voices matter, and we all have limited time. So I think in that way it's actually really, really similar. You have 1 year for a season, we have 1 semester for a syllabus, and we're thinking about what we're putting forward. So I came up here first because I was really surprised with myself because maybe I was thinking like, whoa, maybe I'm in favor of censorship, which I didn't expect. Because everyone was saying artistic risk and, you know, you want to be able to try things. But then I was listening to that alongside what you were saying. And when we're talking about practical life, when we're talking about censorship, we're not like, yeah, there's a line and it's weird and it's hard because some things are blurry, but some things are not blurry. Like, yeah, we should censor ableist ideas. We should fire the bouncer. Like, to me, that's like, it's a weird thing for me to question. I saw earlier today on a Facebook group for teachers, someone was saying that they inherited a syllabus that they had to teach. They didn't have an option, and they were Jewish, and one of the readings was written, the reading wasn't anti-Semitic, but it was written by an anti-Semite. And they were saying they felt really uncomfortable doing it. And everyone said, well, like, you know, you can't censor that. You should be able to teach that, and then you can bring it into conversation. And I was like, ooh, like, no. Like, I don't think you should teach that. I don't think we need to elevate the voices of our oppressors in order to understand oppression. So to me, like, yeah, censor, if that's what censorship is. So I was thinking about bringing these things together of, like, your lived experience of people oppressing you and us being like, but we can't censor them, which isn't what people were saying who were here. But I think it's important to make that distinction of like, yes, we should be able to experiment and take risks, and we shouldn't feel like we have to be censored in some capacities, but also we should censor, like, why do we need to hear the voices of people who are mean? Like, if they're just mean, you know? But then you talked about dichotomies, and I was like, yes, you're totally right, and I'm totally wrong, because I think that was really important. I think I really was thinking in this black and white, like, yes or no idea, and I think what you said was entirely right, and that what my thinking was so this or that. So I'm taking this journey of my brain to say that it is totally complicated, but I think that blurriness, we should also recognize our own ability to see, to not account for bad people within that, you know? Like, we don't have to make space for people who are actively oppressive and don't want to engage in the conversation. Like, people who came to see the movie wanted to engage in the conversation, but we didn't start with their movie about being mean, you know?
Before we move on, I just want to say, in the interest of shedding dichotomies, it's possible for Vince to be totally right without you being totally wrong. Hey.
Hi. I'm Mark. Hi. Yeah, I've only been here for 5 minutes at this table and so much. But what inspired me to come to the table was what you inspired me to come to the table, and so much has been said. I can't remember what you said that got me up here, but I think it was about
something about that.
Here.
It's here. It's here.
But I think it's about like tied to what you were saying, like when the harm is being done to us not by like the racist evil right wing, but when it's coming from like somewhere you would expect something better from, like how and I think it has to do with this. It's so the conversation that we're having right now and in general is one that moves so fast in terms of like people can have well-intentioned people can have completely different understandings of what is right and what is offensive and what is not, and some folks just don't have the privilege or the interest or whatever to keep up with a really fast conversation. In the interest of tying it into personal experience, I see a lot of plays. I work in theater. I see a lot of work, but I'm also a sexual assault survivor, and I'm really deep into. So because of that, I'm really deep into that conversation, particularly with my therapist, and so like I get triggered by a lot of things. Like there's a lot of sexual assault and playwrights love rape. It's like a fun thing to go to. Yeah. And so there's like, but then there's like some things that I'm like, oh, you should know better. And there's something, but then I'm like, one of those things that happens when I get triggered is it's like, 'cause my instinct is to be like, fuck you. But I'm learning to catch myself and be like, should you have known not to do that? Or do I know because of my own lived experience and the fact that I'm like constantly thinking about this kind of thing? Like, is this like someone who hasn't experienced what I've experienced, is this something they would know would set me off in that way? And so like how do I respond when the harm is unintentional or just lazy as opposed to aggressive? Like, and I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I think it does make me think about, the thing that happened and just like the intention and some people just not being up on like how fast the conversation is evolving for some people, and we're all at this table and in this room at different points in different conversations, and how do we get rid of that dichotomy between like free speech and censorship, and like what's that place in the middle where like someone can like without malice really fuck up, and how do we hold that accountable, and how, if you're being held accountable for something like that, I think like a well-intentioned person's reaction to being called out on something like that is to be like, can be to be like, whoa, don't censor me because I shouldn't have known that. I'm also rambling, but
you got to such good places, so
okay.
yeah, don't worry. No censorship here. Those are some really big questions, though. Like, especially, I'm responding to how do I respond to harm that is unintentional or lazy, which is the worst kind.
That's the worst kind.
The could have been avoided but didn't kind.
But it's also hard to like. Lazy is like a glib word, but it's like I pay attention to a lot of these conversations just because I have to, because of the world I live in, and I have a job where that's kind of my job a little bit, but even for me it's hard, and I'm definitely behind on a lot of conversations, and I'm kind of okay at some of them, and I'm great at others, and even with all that work that I put in, I'm still gonna fuck up and say something wrong and stupid at some point. So I just want to I don't know, how do we hold together, like when that harm comes from within, how do we still manage to hold the communities together? Yeah.
I really like what you said about the laziness and the well intention, because I think for me, like even when I was talking about the dichotomy thing, you know, when somebody is doing something with malice, it's much easier to defend yourself, I feel, or to censor that out of your system. But my problem's always been dealing with people who are, one, lazy, unintentional, or worst of all, the well-intentioned.
Yeah, being kind.
Right? The well-intentioned, but inflicts a lot more harm to you. And I feel, it's the kind of questions that I have to ask. And I feel like, you know, I have to switch off all of those triggers that I have in order to walk through Toronto without feeling like I'm shattered. Right? Because if the moment somebody comes to me and asks me, what's your name? And I say, my name is Vince. And they say, no, what's your given name? And, you know, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, my given name is Lam. You know, are you going to be calling me that from? You know, it manifests in so many different ways. You don't know how to anticipate it. You don't know when to censor it. So you start automatically turning these off.
Yeah.
Right? And then it becomes your responsibility to keep yourself together. And same, I completely agree, right? It's like, how do we encourage a system where people take more care in their work, take more care in the stuff that they create and how they hold themselves in the society.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think, sometimes it is our job to keep ourselves together. Like, you know, something can trigger me and like probably only me, you know, and like, am I gonna, like, I had a friend who was working on a project and there was this like very weird detail in it, and I was like, no, fuck this is fucking bullshit, no, this is horrible, you can't do this to people. And I'm like, oh no, this is probably like, maybe not just me, but it's like this isn't like coming from a problem, this is just like and if I'm gonna be participating in culture, I have to like, sometimes I do have to take care of myself. I have to like, the trick is like, where do I draw that line? It's so hard to see when you're like, when you don't have like perspective on it. You're just like, it's like, when is it actually my job and when is it your job to not break me?
I think that's another big like thought, because just with something that Mel said earlier and something that you said, Vince, about that when people just generally talk about risk in art, like, first of all, a lot of time tonight we're talking about risk to the artist, and that's an aspect of it, but then the accountability comes in the risk that the artist is incurring for other people. And I just want to, I guess, throw in graphically the difference between I think it was someone said something about allowing people to fail and fall flat on their face, and the difference between the impact of a failed poem and a failed attempt to juggle chainsaws. And if you're trying to juggle chainsaws and you fail, and some of the artists in our community are trying to juggle chainsaws, and that failure is not on the artist. That failure is not, I mean, it might be a little bit, but that's not where the harm is landing. And so I think that sort of ephemeral argument of like, if the art you're making is so great, if the risk you're taking is so great, you don't need to worry about it. I don't think that there's a level you're operating at where you don't need to worry about it. And I don't think freedom to fail is the same as freedom to slaughter. Can we, we're going to be, I totally see you. We're going to be doing a slow wind down, meaning there's plenty of time for people to still be heard. I just want to mark that it's 9:30 and we have a half an hour left in case anyone is sitting on like the greatest thing we've ever heard but haven't heard yet, to think about that. And also for people who are working on that thought while we sort of rapidly fire bullet points out, can we take a breath for a moment, perhaps, and just have nothing happening in the room for a minute? If we can just breathe together for a moment, and I'll see you on the other side of that. I'm going to ask for no one to speak for about a minute. Thank you. I guess that's it. I literally have no idea how long a minute is.
That was our RP of 15 minutes.
Great. Okay, I'm using it. Just thank you for making that space within this conversation, because we all operate in different ways, and it's good. It's a good thing. Hi.
Hi.
What's on your brain box?
Thank you. Gratitude, first off, for this very rich and vulnerable conversations that we've been having, and that I feel part of because I've been listening to very closely. I feel like speech itself should come from deep listening. It should come from deep listening to community, to yourself, and a search for something true to say. And that truth, I think, I'm curious about its relationship to love and desire, actually. I'm curious about the desire for accountability. That if I harm someone, that I would desire to know what that harm was. Mm-hmm. I would desire that accountability because it offers an opportunity for growth. It offers an opportunity for me to expand who I am in that very humbling moment of acknowledging harm to someone else. It shows me how prismatic my view is. Mm-hmm. How many layers of socialization I've received to inure me to consider harming someone a casual thing. Mm-hmm. And it, I think, brings me back to the responsibility of speaking from a truthful place. From a place where, and in terms of art, to work at the edge of my understanding of something. Not in the comfortable zones where I know everything. Transmits both respect for me, for my journey, perhaps selfishly, but it also transmits respect for the audience and the community. Because perhaps through this process of listening, I'm trying to seek the edges that may be at some invisible barrier that is holding us back. But that desire, I wonder why some people don't desire it. I think fear is a big role, obviously, I guess. And it does take an enormous amount of, I don't know what it takes, actually. But I feel like there's a rich place in that ether of our not understanding our own actions that if we step into might become less cloudy and might create connection where our actions have created disconnection. I yearn for that. And I seek it.
I think I'm trying to collect and figure out there was something that I was responding to, but there were so many things you said where I was like, oh my god, there's nothing to respond there. But something that you said brought me to something that I wrote down here, and it's just kind of like a little spectrum of free speech to censorship, where there's the can and cannot, and then there's the probably shouldn't, definitely shouldn't, and then down to cannot. And for some people, you know, the people who are out rallying because they feel like their free speech is being censored all the time, the people that have the most speech in the world, and said, you know, that when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression thing. Part of that is like reading should not, which is the shouldn't comes from being able to acknowledge the other person and understand the harm that is done when what you say is said. But without that acknowledgement, that definitely should not is read as cannot, is read as censorship.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's still like, where do you find that meeting point where you get that other person to be able to see you when it's also such a labor to try to be seen by the person who doesn't recognize you at all because they're so wrapped up in their own shit, and all they can see is like any threat to their existence in that bubble is read as sort of a censorship, or is read as you know, that equality is oppression thing. And I don't know, it's still a question, but it's, Vince, what you said about finding those shared points, whatever, I don't know, because there's got to be something for amongst the person who you feel is so completely divided from you, and everything that has shaped them is so different from everything that has shaped who you are. But I feel like if you can't find any sort of shared entry point, which is sometimes so hard to be able to get to, especially if tensions are so high, it's only got, like, everything's only going to be read as a hard line, as a cannot when it's a should not, and the should comes in the form of like should know better, because you've acknowledged the person and you understand a little bit more about how your life affects their life.
Can I because I think what some of the things you say really interest me is that we're talking about the idea of truth.
Can you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry. We're talking about ideas of truth, and truth is so subjective, it's so perspective. Your truth is not everyone's truth, and what you feel might be truthful is not truthful for everybody. And once you've already inflicted what you feel is truthful, you've already inflicted the pain on somebody else. You might seem, like you said, it might be, as an artist, you're looking at it as an opportunity for growth. But the pain is already done on the community or the community members that it has harmed. So my question is, like, how are we repairing the harm? But I don't even like that word, repairing.
Addressing?
I don't know, because I feel like sometimes, for example, when we approach the people that we've hurt, even in our personal lives, they have the option of walking away from us. You know, they're not there for the benefit of us to learn our mistakes. We are there to be learning our own mistakes. We have to decipher that. No one is there. It's not their responsibility to be sitting there and telling us how we've gotten it wrong. Yeah, so I feel like we're talking about censorship from more of exterior, more so much in this conversation, that we are not talking a lot about self-censorship. And the self-censorship that I feel that we've been touching upon comes from more of that kind of gut response of fear, shame. There has to be something better as a yardstick for us to do censorship than fear and shame.
I think we're a community that's being really impacted by censorship, state censorship for sure, battles against bills that would limit the kinds of images we could make, media censorship where our stories were and continue to be either erased or warped or monetized. So I'm starting to get the feeling that we have a different relationship to the idea of censorship than maybe certain other communities do. And so we're super careful because we don't want to reproduce that. And I think that's great. But I also think censorship is a tricky word. I think that, when when we want to speak out about something that is causing harm, that's not censorship. I think of censorship as much more of a top-down kind of gesture. And so I think that when we do see harm, when we do feel unsafe, when there is a necessity for repair or for a better kind of desire, that we can share that responsibility. And we can, I think for myself as a teacher, that's something I try to do, is to make sure there's not gratuitous talk about if there's gratuitous violence in a narrative that someone is writing, or if there's racism or sexism, and I see students who are starting to take that up on their own and figure that out. I think it's a curatorial piece. I think it's Mel, you talked about dramaturge. I think that's a shared responsibility. That speaking out and that creating of expressions of queer desire that don't cause harm, that don't have microaggressions. So again, I guess I feel that there are individual responsibilities, but there's also ways in which as a community we can share that work.
Mm-hmm. I have often thought about what you meant around our experience of censorship and how that affects our reaction to it, because I think generally queer, or the queer community, especially for folks older than I am, experienced capital C, hard, state-sponsored censorship, and so it's a very easy place, even for me, to it's muscle memory almost. It's if I see even a tinge of it, I'm going to respond with a full force, because I know I can see it coming, and I know I don't even want it to start in a little inkly place, but it can. I think because we do have a different relationship to it, and I think what it can do is give us this it kind of removes a space for nuance sometimes, and it's it is just can and cannot, because the fight was so real and hard, and it still is, but it's there's a living memory of a much more dire time when we couldn't negotiate the intricacies of whether or not something is censorship, and we just had to fight against it because it was so big and real. And now that it is less so, how do we kind of ease up on that automatic reaction to being censored?
I know there's still a lot of big thoughts in the air, but as we're... Thank you, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, you didn't.
As we're entering the last 5 minutes, I just wanted to check in with you if you wanted to say something before we close out.
I guess a piece that I struggle with a lot is on the accountability piece, and how I think a lot of people look at accountability and they conflate it with censorship. Because I think accountability isn't just about the speaker, but it's the speaker's, it's what Mauricio was saying, it's the speaker's interplay with the audience and with the community. And that's where I think there is the accountability on behalf of the speaker, but also you have an accountability as a community member and an audience member. And this is something that I really struggle with a lot, which is how do you use the platform you have, how to use the privilege that you have to bring accountability where other people can't. And this is something that I really, really try and think through, and it's like a big Pandora's box, and it's a big logic puzzle where, sometimes I think the right approach is, meet someone with compassion, give them the benefit of the doubt, seek connection, and, give them a wide range of latitude. So where it's maybe a should not, give them a lot more space. But then on the other hand, I think, is this just because like I have the privilege that it didn't hurt me as much as it might hurt other people? And so should I step in and actually be a more forceful ally or forceful advocate? And then I think, but like, do I have the experience to even do that? Like, is that, like, how do I even know what someone would want me to do as an ally and advocate in that kind of situation? And then sometimes I'm also just like really tired and anxious and stressed, and I just like don't even want to deal with things. So I think that those are all the pieces that I think about when I think of accountability is like what is your role as an audience member and as a community member. And I think it goes to what a lot of people are saying, where there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of gray areas and it's hard, but it doesn't mean you don't do the work, and it doesn't mean you don't think about it. If anything, it might mean that it's incumbent on you to try and get involved in it, and if you make a mistake, like approach it from a good place and keep trying. And I think the other piece too that I really liked about this long table is when I try and think about like how can I kind of use the space I'm given to try and hold other people accountable, I think what have people told me and what did they want other people to do? Because I think it's a lot to ask someone like, okay, like tell me, how can I be a good ally? Like a lot of times people are actually saying, this is what I would like for people to be a good ally and advocate. And sometimes I just think like I need to listen a lot more when people are offering that, as opposed to going to them and expecting them to do the emotional work of, telling me what to do. Sorry, that was definitely monologue.
That was excellent and useful and something active that I think we can take on. We've got like a minute left, and I'm going to offer it to you if you have something relevant on today. Thank you so much.
When we came into this space, we heard our speaker, Evelyn, welcome us here. She gave very nice land acknowledgement. We hear these all the time, and we ask, why do we bother listening to these? Oh, because of the indigenous people. Because we've oppressed them. Because they're always being killed, and da. But there's one thing that we always say in all these land acknowledgements, and it has to do with all of this. And it's always been present, even at the beginning of these conversations, since theater has decided to take on itself that it should be educating people on what treaties are. I said the big T word. Now, I have enjoyed this conversation immensely, and I've been listening to everyone deeply, and I have a deep confession to make. I'm a high school dropout, and I'm not an academic. And I want to remind people that as being in a country that identifies itself as Canada and being within a province that identifies itself as Ontario, and as being citizens, visitors, immigrants, however you wish to identify, you are a treaty person. We have treaties that specifically talk about what is accountability, what is it in relation to punishment, and why those are not the same things, and why freedom and having the ability to choose what you say as to your responsibility to it. And if you want to speak more, you must take on the equal and shared responsibility of the words you say. And that we can't and should not take for granted the time that we have. Every single day we're reminded that we're running out, and every single day we hear about how this country, these provinces, these politicians want us gone. They want all of this gone. They want to cut our funding. They want to take away our voices. And what does that mean? Where are we going to go? Who are we? We talk about artist communities all the time. A white nationalist can be an artist. They're not a part of our community. An indigenous community isn't necessarily an arts community. An immigrant community isn't necessarily an arts community, because art comes from our culture and our experiences and our soul, and we share that. And sometimes it's ugly, and sometimes we don't do our research, and sometimes it comes out as lazy. But what of it? We have each other. And we're scared to talk to each other now. That was mentioned earlier. We don't know how to approach each other. We don't know how to acknowledge each other. We don't know how to listen to each other. When I was at Paprika, from my own experience, Daniel gave me a very, very special lesson to which I've been carrying with me just the other day. He said, "Don't ouch my young." Now, within this context, I take pleasure in something and you may not, but please do not attack it. And if you do, know that you are my enemy, but keep in mind, we do not make peace with our friends. We make it with the people who have hurt us, because we don't want to hurt them and we don't want them to hurt us. If we do not make spaces for the people that want to hurt us, we do not give them an equal chance, and we just ridicule them and take away their homes and take away their spaces and take away their jobs and take away their friends and take away their communities. What are they left with? They're left with each other, and what do they want? They want to get back at the people who've taken this away from them. If all we do is fight endless wars against each other, if all we do is blather and talk about all the ways that we want to change and how we are acknowledging it and how we will speak about it once every time before beginning of a show, but then it's done, that is all your commitment is, then you're not a community. You're a public spokesperson for something that doesn't represent us. We fought through so much to get here. We have gone through abuse. We have gone through each other. We have gone through systems and systematic eradication of ourselves. But look how beautiful it can be when we can listen to each other. Look what happens when we communicate. When we decide to listen and make the distinction between listening and speaking and waiting to speak. Actors, writers, whatever you may identify, academics, you have to choose every single word you have, and you have to allow it, everything you know, to impact you deeply. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to hold back your voice until it hurts so much that you can feel it within your chest, and it hurts. It hurts so much to not be able to believe in yourself that you can speak or take the space. And you want to hear what people say, and you can't approach the conversation in a way that honors everything that was just spoken, because you want to answer every single question, and you want you to be the answer when you are a part of a community, and answers come from community and conversation. It doesn't all have to come from you. We have each other, so listen, be forgiving, know when someone hurts you and know when you hurt them, and know that there is a place to move forward. Treaties are nothing more but relationships. A relationship you have with someone isn't set in stone from that day and never changing. The boundaries can move. You can move the boundaries. You can communicate. The treaty must be updated. The chain that binds you together must be polished continuously, or it will rust and fall apart and be forgotten. And if we forget our relationships and we forget what treaties are, and that we must remake them every year, every day with ourselves and our friends and our family and our loved ones, if we don't do that work, we are alone and we are nothing.
Well, that covered all the territory and then got dark. I think thank you for that. There was a lot in that to draw from, and I think I want to go back to the beginning, to we are treaty people, and we are asking again and again a question to which there is an answer. And the answer is older than we are. And I think that's a really good reminder that the tools exist that we can go back to. Awesome. We are at time. I'm going to throw some really quick questions to you to take into your life or leave here. What are the areas in which you are intractable, in which you will not be moved? What are the areas in which your uncertainty is so heavy that you cannot be talked out of it? Who are the people in your life and invited into your work that have credibility with you, that they can challenge your certainty? What are the areas in which you have credibility where it is your place to speak because you have the knowledge to credibly address what's taking place? Those are just challenges I put to you in moving forward. And with thanks to my friend here, I'll add, go read a treaty. That's good reading for you, and it's right there. Thanks to everyone for a fantastic conversation. Thanks to everyone who participated. Thanks to everyone who listened attentively. We are all part of this conversation, and you're appreciated. On your way out, you can write on the table, you can write on the wall, you can kick me in the ankle, whatever. We're done here. There's no more rules. Thank you, Evelyn. Do you want to close off? You can remind us the next date.
By saying thank you to the app and
yeah, man.
Let's just like take a collective breath together.
And we've all now collaborated on that breath. Go team!